You ever sit in a room full of people you thought were family and realize you're the only one who doesn't belong there? Not because you did something wrong, but because one person decided you don't deserve kindness. That was my sister-in-law, Melissa. For 7 years, she made sure I never forgot that I was just the wife, never real family. Every Christmas, every birthday, every barbecue at my in-laws' house had the same pattern. Melissa would walk in late, heels clicking, arms full of glossy gift bags smelling like expensive perfume and drama. She'd hand gifts to my husband, to his parents, to his cousins, even to the neighbor's kid who barely showed up, and then she'd skip me like I was empty space. At first, I told myself it was a misunderstanding. The first year, I thought maybe she forgot. The second year, I thought maybe money was tight. By the fourth year, it was a tradition. Everyone would clap and laugh as people opened presents, and I would sit on the same couch, hands folded, a frozen smile on my face, pretending it didn't burn. Once, her 5-year-old son looked at me and whispered, "Aunt Lily, why don't you get presents?" Before I could answer, Melissa laughed and said, "Sometimes people don't earn gifts, sweetie. They just show up." Everybody went quiet for a second, then someone changed the subject and the night moved on, but my face stayed hot for hours. It wasn't just gifts. If I brought a dish, she'd accidentally forget to put it on the table. If I tried to join a conversation, she'd turn her back and start a new one. One Thanksgiving, my mother-in-law complimented my pumpkin pie, and Melissa said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Yeah, but store-bought crust doesn't count as baking, does it?" People laughed. I did too, a little, just to survive the moment. Later that night, when we were cleaning up, I heard her in the kitchen with my husband. "She's fine, I guess," Melissa said, "but she's not us, David. She's not real family. You settled." My husband snapped at her and defended me, but I was staring at my reflection in the dark kitchen window, hearing that sentence on repeat. She's not real family. Fast forward 2 more years. By then, I had learned to armor up. I brought my own coffee, my own dessert, my own exit plan. That year, at Christmas, an old woman arrived I hadn't seen before. Her name was Aunt Margaret. Widowed, no kids, lived out of state. Melissa attached herself to her like a magnet, pulled out chairs, poured drinks, laughed at every joke. She kept saying things like, "We have to get you out of that old house, Auntie. You deserve a spa bathroom, a big yard. I can help you with everything." Later, my husband told me quietly in the hallway, "Aunt Margaret is loaded. Investments, property, the whole thing. If she passes, her estate is huge." Suddenly, everything clicked. The extra effort, the fake sweetness, the way Melissa kept steering every conversation towards future plans. I watched Margaret that night. She was kind, sharp, and noticed everything. She also noticed how Melissa ignored me every time she handed something out. At the end of the night, Margaret came to the kitchen where I was washing dishes alone. She dried a plate, stood next to me, and said, "You know, dear, being excluded says more about the person doing it than the person being left out." I laughed awkwardly. "I'm used to it," I said. She shook her head. "Don't ever get used to being disrespected." After that holiday, Margaret started inviting us over for tea. Except most of the time she asked for only me. "I want to get to know you," she'd say on the phone, without the noise. We'd sit at her small kitchen table. She'd tell me stories about traveling in her 20s, losing her husband, starting over. She listened when I talked about my job, my anxiety, the way I felt invisible in that family sometimes. She'd frown when I mentioned the gift situation. "She really never brings you anything? Not even something small?" I shrugged. "I don't really care about the stuff. It's what it means." Margaret nodded slowly. "She thinks gifts buy closeness. People like that always forget one thing. You can't buy character." A year later, Aunt Margaret got sick. Hospital visits, quiet updates in the family group chat, the slow dread everyone pretended not to feel. During this time, Melissa went into overdrive. She visited constantly, took selfies by Margaret's bedside, posted long captions about cherishing every moment with family. With me, she was worse than ever. If I walked into Margaret's room with flowers, Melissa would say, "Oh, you didn't need to bring anything. Aunt Margaret knows you don't really do gifts." Margaret squeezed my hand so tight that her eyes said more than her weak voice could say. A few months later, Margaret passed. The funeral was small and quiet. Melissa cried loudest. When the lawyer called the family for the will reading a few weeks later, Melissa showed up in a designer black dress, heels, and a notebook. She sat in the front row like it was a business meeting. The lawyer cleared his throat and started reading. Small bequests first. A painting to a cousin, some savings bonds to the grandkids. Then he said, "To my niece Melissa, I leave my collection of snow globes." There was a beat of silence. Everyone knew Margaret's snow globes, cheap little souvenirs from random cities. Nice, but not money. The lawyer continued, "To my nephew David and his wife Lily, I leave my primary residence, my savings, and my jewelry collection, because Lily treated me like family when she had nothing to gain." My ears rang. Melissa's smile snapped off her face like glass breaking. The lawyer read out the numbers, the house, the accounts, the estimated value. My hands started shaking. David squeezed my knee under the table. Melissa stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "This is a joke," she said. "She barely knows her." The lawyer calmly showed her the signed pages, Margaret's handwriting, the date, the witnesses. Melissa turned to me, eyes wild. "You manipulated her. You turned her against me." I finally stood up. My voice was steady in a way it had never been at any family event before. "No, Melissa," I said. "You did that all by yourself. You spent years showing her who you really were. I just showed up, remember?" She lunged toward the desk, yelling that she would contest it, that blood comes first, that I was no one. Security escorted her out of the office as she screamed that I stole her future. Her designer jacket caught on the door and ripped. For the first time in 7 years, nobody rushed to help
help her. In the weeks that followed, the calls started. Cousins, aunts, people who had watched me sit giftless on that couch year after year, they apologized, not for what Melissa did, but for staying quiet. One cousin told me she found old texts where Melissa bragged about putting me in my place. Another admitted Melissa used to say, if I ignore her long enough, she'll stop coming. Problem solved. We moved into Margaret's house slowly. I took my time opening each jewelry box, each one labeled in Margaret's careful handwriting. On the dresser, there was one last envelope with my name on it. Inside was a note. Lily, I couldn't change how they treated you, but I could choose who I trusted with what I built. You were the only one who never acted like I was a bank. Please use this to build a life where no one gets to decide if you deserve a gift. Love, M. I sat on the floor and cried. Last week, out of nowhere, Melissa texted my husband a long paragraph about how unfair it all still is, how everyone plans for inheritance, and how I stole what should have stayed in the family. He read it, sighed, and finally replied, you had 7 years to treat my wife like family. You chose not to. Margaret just gave you what you earned. Then he blocked her. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about all those Christmases I sat empty-handed on that couch. Back then, I thought gifts were proof of love. Now I know better. The real gift was finally taking everything she used to hold over me, the power to humiliate me, the right to decide my worth, and ripping it out of her hands for good. So if you're listening to this and you're the outsider in someone else's family, remember this. You don't need their presence to prove your worth presence. Sometimes the quiet one in the corner walks away with more than anyone ever saw coming.